get to feed off of all the energy that's been created before me. So, they've done all the work, and you all have fed and created the energy, so we're just going to take all this energy and utilize it for this last hour and get something out of this to close everything out. And then you all will get a chance to hear from Bob Brown. We'll be coming to do the question and answer session. And all the questions that you did not get to ask so far, you get a chance to direct towards him. And he can provide the most insightful answers. One of the things we were talking about downstairs, from the evaluation forms, that there's been a lot of feedback that some of the workshops are too short. And that's good, because that tells us that people want more insight. And the truth is, we knew that all we would be able to do, as you've heard from everybody, is scratch the surface. That's all we can do. But we will have more opportunities to get into each one of these. Some of us, we actually have gotten into these workshops in a series, as much as 8 or 9 weeks for anger and other things. So there'll be more opportunities to get more in depth, but hopefully this is enough to scratch the surface. Now, I need to squash a rumor, because I don't like gossip. And there's a rumor floating around here that I need to squash, because I've heard that somebody's been saying that, these notes that I used somehow ended up on the L tracks, and I went down there and got it. That's not true. So if y'all heard that, that is not true. Because I heard this mentioned, and I don't like gossip, I did not drop them on the L in the snow. And when I spread out, and I did not go out there and get it. All right, so if y'all heard that, that's not true. Because that's how rumors get started. But sometimes your upbringing helps you, because in New York, when you're a playful kid, you go everywhere. And so you understand about the third rail, So
you got one here too.
Right. So, you stay where you're at, straight,
Okay.
You're in trouble. So, but like I said, it's not true. All right, so don't go, that's my brother, don't go back. Spray it back. I hear about it. Okay. The last perversion is attachment. And I was asked to share some insights directly from our teacher on this perversion called attachment. And of course, the opposite is detachment. And you've heard a lot about it already. And as everyone has said, they all are linked together. You can't have one without the other. And we're going to talk specifically about detachment and how to live in a detached state. But of course, first of all, we have to talk about attachment. And attachment is very, very subtle. It's a very, very subtle perversion. Some of them are more upfront than others, and some of them are more subtle, like the Radasi was talking about, lust. And then, of course, they all show up on different levels. So within this hour's time, I want to just try to give some insights that you all can utilize, and then hopefully you take the time to go forth from here and get more into it. Now, let me just throw this out. What is anybody's definition of attachment? And let's just look at it as it relates to a psychological function that our minds perform. What is attachment? Clinging on. Okay, holding on to stuff. Okay, good. Anybody else?
A preoccupation with an object or solution.
Okay, good. Did you have anything? Okay. Obsession. All right. Connected. Okay.
Joined at the hip.
Joined at the hip. So these are all actually very good descriptions. Attachment, as it relates to the actual perversion, for the definition that we're going to be using, is a form of bonding. Bonding with objects, people, roles that we play throughout our lives. And of course, anytime you have something, you are in relationship with it. So attachment is a level of bonding. But it's a level of bonding to the point with roles, with objects, with people, to the point where it becomes pathological and dysfunctional. That's what attachment actually is as a definition. It's a way of bonding that is to the point where it's overdone. It's overboard like everything else. And it has useful purposes, and then it has levels where it becomes pathological. And hopefully we'll get a chance to look into some of this. Attachment is a way of bonding with objects, with people, with roles that we play. And we see them as the source, the very source of our happiness. And because we identify them as the source of our happiness, our relationship with them goes from known to abnormal. Okay? Because if you see something as a source of your happiness, then you're going to look at it an entirely different way. It's a way of actually even becoming misidentified with something. You know, I am my car. I am my house. I am my wife. I am my husband. Becoming misidentified. It's a way of clinging to these things out of the desire to continue out of our desire to experience continuous pleasure. And in doing that, we simply act out of the ignorance of their impermanence. Because none of these objects and roles and people that we are in relationship with are permanent. And it would take a lot more time to get more in depth, but if you just simply, now, all the workshops are talking about self-observation. And what I'm asking us to do, again, is to keep this whole discussion within the context of our lives, okay? To actually reflect upon how we live it. And that's one of the good things about what we do at the House of Ra, is because everything that we talk about is grounded in the need to look at self, we get a chance to get knowledge that is knowledge. It's not about knowledge. You know, when you read books about stuff, you get about knowledge. You know what the thing is about. You may know a lot about what it's about, but you don't know what it is, because you have to see and experience. So just by keeping it within the context of self-observation, then we get a chance to see it within ourselves. So we're experiencing these objects and roles and people, and they give us pleasure. You know, you get pleasure out of these things. But the thing is, we want to keep pleasure going. We want to keep it going. We want to sustain it as long as possible. And in doing so, we develop a real pathological relationship. We simply want to hold on to things that are not permanent, that are impermanent, and try to make them permanent. So it's a way of actually living out of touch with reality. You're trying to make something what it isn't. So that's what attachment actually means. It means to be misidentified with things as a source of our happiness, and also as who we are. And if you don't know if you actually don't know who you are, then you can become whatever's in your life. You know, and this is what we do, because we really don't know who we are. We become misidentified with all kinds of things, and then we relate to them in that way. You know, and then it becomes real, real dangerous. So it's a way of actually inflicting pain upon ourselves, because you're living outside of reality. Now, some of the causes of attachment. You see, when we have these experiences of pleasure, you see, and we have to keep in mind, the result of this, one of the basic impulses that we have as human beings is simply to experience pleasure and avoid pain. I mean, if you really think about it, that's what we're all about. Everything we do is aimed towards experiencing pleasure and avoiding pain.
Yes, sir.
And that's at the bottom, that underlies all the things that we do, consciously and unconsciously. Everything we do is either trying to generate some pleasure and trying to avoid pain. And one of the things that we do is we misidentify pleasure with happiness. And for most of us, what we look at as happiness is just continuous pleasure. As long as the pleasure is uninterrupted, now I'm happy. You know, and as long as you can sustain it, you're happy. The minute it gets interrupted, you're not happy.
Pissed off.
Right, pissed off, angry, right? So what we are calling happiness is really just, you know, man, I just want to keep this going. Let me keep this pleasure going. Or let me avoid this pain. You see? So it's motivated out of that impulse. Now again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with an impulse to be happy. That's part of what comes with being human, and to avoid pain. So the impulse itself is not abnormal, but it's how we take that and we want to sustain it. Okay? Now when I talk about the impermanency, and that's been discussed, there are certain laws of the universe, you know, like gravity, and all the laws of electricity. Well, there's also laws of impermanence. For example, anything that is born will die. Period. Anything that is born will die. And you don't know when it's going to die. Anything that comes together will separate. Okay? Now, these are part of the teachings that when you examine the books and the tapes outside, you'll get a lot more in-depth insight into this. Anything that is amassed, anything that we build up will eventually be depleted. Money, anything else. Anything that is constructed will be destructive. These are some of the laws of impermanence. They have to do with loss and change. And all the things that we are in relationship with operate within those laws. There is nothing that operates. And one of the things we have to do is we can get a chance to sit down and think about this. Think about something in our life that is not subject to the laws of impermanence. Try to find something in our life that is permanent. I mean, and really sit down and get with that. And then see, now, if that's the case, why am I trying to make permanent happiness and pleasure out of these things that are not permanent? And you see, the thing is, the pleasure that we're experiencing from these things is real. I mean, when you get pleasure out of your car or out of your money or out of your woman, whatever it is, that pleasure is real. You feel it. That's not fake. So it's an urgency involved with clinging to that. I mean, this is real. This feels good right now. And I want to keep it going. So this is a real energy that you are actually feeling, that we are feeling. And we want to continue that. Or if we're doing something to take us out of our cycle of misery and suffering, that feels good, it feels real. And we want to keep that going. Therefore, we cling, we hold, we want to grab onto it. And that creates attachment. And actually, in psychological terms, it's called an internal stressor. It's the urgency to hold on that creates the stress and tension. You know, I got to hold on to it. And then, of course, all the strategies and everything else. But it's that urge to want to hold on to these things that creates this internal stress and this preoccupation. You know, that takes our time and our energy. You know, you sit at work and you're thinking about, you know, whatever, holding on. Right. And, you know, it's a very real energy. And that urgency, you see, is what creates that bonding, that makes it attachment. And as I said, it's called an internal stressor because it creates internal stress. That's what it does. Now, and the truth of the matter is that most of us are not even in relationship to the things in our lives to try to get pleasure. The truth, most of us, or at least many of us, are in relationship with these things to actually just avoid pain. We are in a state of misery and unhappiness in our lives, and we want some relief from that. So we are actually just trying to get some relief from our misery. It's not even, in many cases, we're not even trying to get happy. We're just trying to stop from feeling bad. You know? And it's like trying to get functionally miserable, as opposed to dysfunction, hysterically miserable, to the point where you be in Sat Ra's office on his couch. You know? Therapist. So, you know, and so for many people, just the day-to-day, moment-to-moment experience of misery is what they're looking for relief from. So it's not even about trying to get happy, it's just trying to get relief from feeling bad. You know? And of course, Freud talked about the psychopathology of everyday life. That truth is that most people, we're just living day-to-day lives of misery. And we get just enough relief from the misery of our lives to stop from going crazy. This is the type of life that many people are leading. And that creates the urgency and pleasure for relief. We need relief from this. You know, the line between normal and abnormal, you know, functional, dysfunctional, sometimes very thin. You know? And truth is, we can go back and forth. Not like there's a big gap. So sometimes we go back and forth between being happy and thinking about being out of here. A lot of people live their life like this. So all this just demonstrates this urge that we have to extend the feeling of pleasure or just simply relief from being miserable. Now, let's talk about this. So objects, roles, people, what are some of the type of objects that we become attached to? What are some of the roles that we become attached to?
People.
What's some of the people? Okay, who are some of the people that we can become attached to in our lives?
Anybody?
Anybody.
Okay, give me
Children.
children.
Mother.
You attracted to us.
Children,
Spouses.
spouses, husband,
Children.
dogs. Yeah. All right. What are some of the objects that we can become attached to? Shavani said stuff. Right.
My grandmother's dishes.
Your grandmother's dishes. And keep in mind with attachment, you see, not all attachment is material or physical. You have material levels of attachment. Then you have, now what are some of the roles that we play that we become attached to? That we actually think, this is who I am.
Supervise on your
Supervisor.
Hey, boy.
Mother.
Mother. Right.
Big brother.
Big brother.
School teacher.
Wife.
Wife, okay.
Lawyer. Doctor.
Lawyer, doctor. So these are all things that we can become attached to, and we do become attached to. Now, we have to really understand how this happens psychologically. This stuff is not going on in our awareness. You are not, in most cases, we're not consciously aware that we are attached to stuff until something happens, and then we find out. And those things are the laws of impermanence, loss and change. When you experience loss or change in a lot of these situations, then you'll find out how attached you are. See? And we're going to talk about some of those kind of feelings that come along. So it's not like we are aware that we're attached to things. That's why it's so subtle. We may actually think that we have a healthy relationship with this thing until it gets, and keep in mind, loss and change is part of life, right? I mean, is there any way of avoiding loss and change? No. So there's no way around that. So when it happens, that's when we really get a chance to find out what kind of relationship we have with these objects and people and so on and so forth. But as I was saying, there's also non-material levels of things, such as our thoughts. We become attached to our thoughts and our concepts of ourselves. And Radasi talked a lot about vanity. We become attached to those things. You see, our knowledge. We become attached to our presumptions of our knowledge. You know? So it's all kind of levels, and we have to see all this. This is why when we sit down and examine our attachments, we have to see to the level of the material, physical things, and those things that are emotional and mental, to really bring it all up. In order to deal with it, we have to bring it all up. Now we're going to talk about some of the actual effects. We talked about what some of the objects of attachments are, and what is attachments, and now we're going to talk about what are some of the effects. Okay? One of the things that happens during attachment is that, as Radasi mentioned, we actually pinch ourselves. We inflict suffering upon ourselves. Attachment is a way of inducing and inflicting pain upon ourselves and not even realizing it. Okay? So that in itself is worth taking a look at. If you knew that you were doing something to harm yourself, you want to take a look at it. Hopefully, unless we got any masochists in here. You know, people that enjoy pain. Of course, one of the things that happens is that when you are in a state of attachment, you create all the other perversions. All of them. So it's our desire, our overwhelming desire to experience pleasure, right, in the form of lust, that creates attachment to begin with. It's our overwhelming desire to experience pleasure and avoid pain. Then, of course, once we're in attachment, we want to stay there. So that creates a state of greed. We're not content. Then, if you become attached to something and you become misidentified with it, like your car, your house, you see, this creates something that you can become vain about. Vanity is the false basis of pride. So, if you are thinking, I'm so great because I have a nice house, that means you are getting pride from something that is not part of who you are. Therefore, your pride is false. How can you be proud about something as if it's part of you? Now we're talking about being misidentified with it. So becoming proud to the point of being arrogant about something as if it's part of you is a way of creating our own vanity. And then anger. Because if you are in attachment to something and it gets threatening anyway, you're gonna go off. You know? And you do go off all the time. We do. You see? Because now, there's that fear. Because of loss and change. I'm about to lose this thing that's making me happy. This is the foundation for all the happiness in my life. And it's about to disappear. I can't deal with that. Or this thing is part of who I am. You driving down the expressway, your car breaks down, so you break down. Right there inside the expressway. You have a nervous breakdown because the car broke down. Now again, there's a difference between being concerned, right? And being just overwhelmed and pathological about it. And some people actually go crazy because things start changing. Or things get lost. Another effect of attachment is that, you see, we have energy, right? We are energy. And so we have energy and time and attention to give to things. And again, if you're in a state of attachment, we're utilizing a lot of time and a lot of energy simply thinking about how to stay attached. Energy that could be used on the task at hand. Now you're sitting there ironing and you thinking about, oh man, I gotta hold on. My wife's, she's left me, and what time she went out, what time she coming back, or, think about your job or anything other than what you're doing, which means we're not even giving our attention to the task at hand. And a lot of times it has consequences, but it's a form of robbing ourselves of energy because the energy that we're using is distracting us. Something else that happens is, in order to deal with attachment, in order to deal with this fear of loss and this fear of change, we start becoming attached to things that are not really helpful, right? So one of the things in which we deal, for example, as black people with racism, you see, is we start becoming attached to things to relieve ourselves of that stress and tension. So for many of us, drugs and sex, you see, and all kind of ideologies, religion, cultural, all kind of ideologies, all kind of objects. For us, we develop a pathological relationship with these things because they help relieve our stress and tension from dealing with the racism that's very, very present for us as a people. And because we in many cases, or most cases, unfortunately, we do not have really authentic coping skills. We turn to all kind of stuff, right, to just get some relief. And like I said, in many cases, it's not about feeling happy, it's about just getting some relief. The white man's doing this, the white man's doing that. We're very aware of the spectrum of all the stuff that's going on in our life, and we need some relief from that. And since we don't have any coping skills, attachment, And again, it can be to material things, it can be to ideologies. There's a reason why there's religious fanaticism in the world. How people become so attached to their religion that they will kill you over their God. Because it's giving them consolation. It's making them feel good. In many cases, religion is not about truth and salvation. It's about consolation. It's like this. It just makes you feel better. And if this thing is making you feel better, you will kill over it. Well, you kill over, somebody looking at your wife at the club. You kill over that. Right?
Stepping on your new shoes.
Right, yeah, there you go, stuff. Yeah, man, kids. You see kids do all kinds of stuff. In the high school level, right? The stuff that they do. Over new jackets and stuff.
Oh, man.
Y'all know. Y'all know what happens. People get killed over jackets and stuff. So, we have to, unfortunately, we have lost our coping skills. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But as black people, one of the things that we have to realize is because we don't really understand, we have lost the ability that our ancestors had to deal with suffering, period.
Yes, sir.
They had an ability to deal with suffering in a way that's completely different than what we do when we get suffering, you know? And because we don't have that, therefore, that creates an opportunity for attachment. And we have to actually see this. Now, what are some of the symptoms of attachment? Because a lot of us could say, yeah, I said it's real subtle. And, all right, I'm going to stop becoming attached and trying to pick it up. All right. So we talked a little bit about attachment. Now, what does it look like? Remember, we have to see, as therapists, as counselors, one of the things that we have to always, we have to help people see things that they can't see. So as part of this workshop all day, hopefully you all will, we'll all get a chance to consider that we need to see. We actually have to see what anger looks like, attachment looks like. So what are some of the symptoms? What does it look like when you are attached?
Changes in your everyday lifestyle.
Okay.
What I mean by that, your language.
Your language.
The way you talk to others can change.
So if you're in a state of attachment,
Right.
what type of language, how would that?
Well, say like if you're from a certain area and they talk the way in a certain area, and you're taken out of that area and for a long time, and you come back, you know what I'm saying, when you come back, you're talking different. I mean, you've been exposed to something else, and maybe somebody said, well, that's not the way we talk
Right.
here, and you can make the bridge back to the way it was going on when you was at home.
Okay, so you became attached maybe to somebody else's way of doing something.
Right.
Okay, good, good.
No sleep.
No sleep, okay?
Depression.
Mood swings, all right.
Depression.
Depression, okay, good.
Angry.
Angry, okay, good.
I have a question. We're only talking about ways that we can see attachment when the attachment has been kind of bothered or something. Like depression doesn't usually happen when you're being fulfilled by your attachment, but when the attachment has been taken away, right?
Right, well, yeah, I mean, either you can see it, see, for example, we're learning about self-observation. Now today, after the day, hopefully we'll be able to sit down with ourselves and look and see, even without maybe the experience of a loss and change happening. But certainly if we can't see it in times of just, ordinary day-to-day, you'll definitely get a chance to see it when something happens. You see? Now, the first thing, the number one indicator, because some of us may not think that we're attached to things, and we need to have a way of knowing. How do I know if I'm attached to something? What does it look like? Here's the best indicator. Worry. If you are worried about something, you are attached to it.
Period.
Period. Or else, what is your worry based off of?
Right.
Now again, I'm not talking about concerned and aware of things and the need to, take steps and take precautions. I'm talking about worried, anxious. If you are worried, if you are worried about anything, then you are attached to that thing. But we have to see it. That's where the worry is generated from. It is coming from holding on, from being in a level of relationship with it that is to the point of being dysfunctional. So worry is the best indicator.
Like you're fearful of losing it.
Mhm.
Worry.
Right. And we're going to talk about some more of those. I mean, all kind of things, but this is the best one. I mean, next time you find yourself worrying, stop and pause. And we're going to talk about contemplation, because part of what we have to do is learn how to separate enough time to see things. We get signals all the time, but we're just so busy living our lives, moment to moment, day to day, just doing stuff, But next time you find yourself worried about something, stop it right there and check it out. And find out, why am I worried about this thing? And you will find that on some level there's some attachment going on. We can be attached to things in the past, or in the future. See, a lot of times we're not attached to things that are just happening in the present. Sometimes we're attached to things that happen way in the past, or things that we want to happen in the future. Therefore, daydreaming, fantasizing. I'm talking about compulsively. You sitting at work thinking about something that happened 20 years ago, or thinking about something that you want to have happen 5 years from now. I'm talking about to the point where you are distracted, taken out of what you're doing. Daydreaming and fantasizing. You know, attached to something, since there's no happiness or pleasure in the present, the mind's gonna go where the happiness is. If you got something in the past that you were still attached to, and it's generating pseudo pleasure from 20 years ago, you know? Or thinking about, man, you know, if I could put it behind us, I'd be happy. Well, if I put the lotto, I'd be happy with it.
Yeah,
You know?
We're the lotto.
Right. Of course, now if that happens, that's another case. But we get a chance to simply see this whole idea, and that really gets into how we see happiness. You know? What else? One of the things that you get to see in a state of attachment, panic. I'm talking about actual panic, terror. Great anxiety, right? Thinking about the idea that something that you are attached to is going to get hurt or it's going to disappear. I mean, this stuff creates terror for people who are holding on for some pleasure. They're trying to avoid pain.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that it's the idea that creates the terror. This thing ain't nothing even threatening. It's the idea that something might threaten it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, in anger we talk about that the threat to it might not even be real.
Right.
But if you think it might be real to you. And if you think something's about to harm or change or create loss, you're going to go into panic, terror, anxiety, right? Yes, sir. Go ahead, brother. You want to share something?
No.
You witness it, huh? You testify. But I mean, we have to actually, this stuff is actually going on inside of us. I'm talking about trembling, shaking, you know, sitting there, oh my God, you know, I mean, this stuff, this is real. And we have to see that. Why, what's generating that, you know? Then, of course, if the thing does happen to dissolve, which it will, right? Because nothing is permanent. It's going to be lost, it's going to be changed. Now, grief, sorrow, misery, regret, you know, because the thing that you have identified as your happiness is gone. Now you're in a state of mourning. I mean, we feel this stuff. Just deep, profound misery, wallowing. Oh my God. You know? And as a matter of fact, grief is always proportionate to your level of attachment. Now again, in therapy, counseling, go ahead.
So under this, like, in the 1930s when the stock market crashed, and all them cats started jumping off buildings, suicide even,
Absolutely.
you know, you can become attached to the point that you lose something and actually kill yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Because that thing, you have identified that thing as part of you, or the source of your happiness. So, all these experiences. In counseling and therapy, there's a thing called the normal bereavement process. And again, it's normal to grieve. There's absolutely nothing abnormal about grief. And there's no such thing as a certain time. But one thing you get to look at is, how is this grief, you know, really affecting me? And depending on the level of attachment, that will be a direct indicator of the grief level. The more you attach to something, the more you'll grieve. Now, it'd be nice to think that we're just grieving over human beings, but sometimes we grieve over all kinds of stuff, you know?
Moses time.
Yeah, you know, because I was going to say, actually people lose their jobs and just weeks, months later die. People
Oh, heck yeah.
their husbands after 20 years and for no apparent reason just die.
Absolutely.
Totally attached.
Totally. You know, to the point where, you know, we just can't handle it. We just can't handle the loss and change, you know.
Is that why, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but is that along the same lines that elderly people, once their spouse die, they usually what they say in 6 weeks that they in 6 months? 6 weeks. They usually die right immediately after that, especially if they've been married like 50 and 60.
Yeah.
Think about how much attachment gets created over 40, 50, 60 years. And when that person, you're right, I mean, when that person dies, it's very likely that on some level that person's going to lose part of their will to live. This is somebody that's been, or something, or someone who's been part of their life for 40, 50, 60 years. You know, so that's a good example of it. Hunter?
What you're saying is that really speaks volumes to the wisdom that our ancestors had, and why they had ceremonies specifically for grief, why in Kemet that you had women who were specifically trained to elicit crying and sorrow out of people. I mean, they had a profound understanding that just today, molecular biologists are discovering that you have cells that turn on because of grief, and they lead to a cascade of self-destruction. So it's very important to release that grief, release that attachment within 72 hours, because that's all the time you have before the cascade stops. It becomes very difficult to reverse that.
And that's part of what I was saying, that we have lost the ability that our ancestors had to deal with grief, to deal with suffering.
Absolutely.
And there's all kind of things, and that's a whole nother workshop. But certainly, even when we look at slavery, which some of us are so ashamed of that we don't even want to look at, but there's a lot of lessons in terms of how these people have survived that ordeal. That when we just get a little bit, there's nothing even close to that, we just, boom, lose it. You know? They maintain their sanity, and we're about to lose ours and a lot, you know? Now, what are some of the behaviors? What are some of the behaviors that come with being in an attached state? Again, we want to see, what does it look like? All right? What does it look like to be in a detached state? What does it look like to be in an attached state? What are some of the behaviors that come along with being in a state of attachment to objects, to people, to roles, okay? Anger, all right?
You smack somebody.
Crying, smacking.
You smack somebody.
Okay? Smack somebody. You said that 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Don't act rationally.
Don't
or
act rationally.
reasonably to a
Right.
situation.
And you can't act rational because you're not thinking rational. And behavior flows from thought. If you're not thinking rationally, you can't act rationally.